how you can renovate your own vintage doll's house. I've been playing with doll's houses all my life, but I'm by no means an expert, so please get a second or third opinion and do everything responsibly. So, can you make a good guess about the age of your doll's house? There are always going to be exceptions to rules, so I can only give you advice, and I would encourage you to join and support the Dolls Houses Past and Present website, or to join a Facebook group about antique and vintage dolls houses. There, you'll be able to ask for help in identifying your house and advice about what to do with it from fellow dolls house enthusiasts. It is important to correctly identify your house, because removing the original papers or fixtures can destroy half to 3/4 of the value of your new old house. Who knows? Your junk shop doll's house could be worth a fortune, but probably not. It is difficult to know if a house is antique, vintage or modern, and there are always exceptions. This house was made around 1990, but could easily be confused with an antique house, and vice versa. So how do you date a doll's house? The first clue is in the windows. If they are wood, they can be anything from a rare 16th century house to a high quality house made last week. That's not very helpful, but stay with me. Metal windows start to appear from around 1910 and were phased out in the mid-1970s in favour of plastic. Plastic windows started to gain in popularity from the late 1950s and are, of course, still used today. This homemade house has both wooden and plastic windows. The windows are made by a company called Tudor. These windows are used by the Doll's House Emporium, but they are also sold individually to people who want to make their own dolls' houses. These fitments come from a house made by a company called GB. This house has both metal and plastic windows. The plastic windows are marked Toyworks. This house was a model that was popular in the 1970s. These are tinplate windows made by Triang from around 1920. Often the houses have metal shutters too, but in this house they are wooden and hand-painted. This Triang Devonshire cottage uses the same windows as in the previous picture. They were originally grey, but someone had painted them a cream colour, so I decided to keep them that way. These tinplate windows originally had real glass. How times and safety regulations have changed. These Triang metal windows, with fabric curtains and plastic glazing, were used in houses from around the mid-1950s. Their scale is approximately 16th, or 1:16, also known as place scale. Amersham use metal windows that are a little larger than Triang, although the house is in 16th scale. These windows were made by Romside and were available from the Hobbies catalogues. They were originally green, but the previous owner had painted them red, so I've decided to keep them that colour. Plastic starts to replace metal from the 1970s. These Hobbies windows from the Hobbies catalogue were green and are still available today. This colourful Toyworks Tudor-style doll's house is in 18th scale. It dates from the early 1980s and is similar to one I had as a child. Toyworks houses are not to everyone's taste, but they are so bright, jolly and cheerful, and I love them. This is a Doll's House Emporium Classical with plastic windows. The door is a replacement. They were sold during the 1990s, and a newer version is available today. The Doll's House Emporium Classical is exactly what it says it is, and it is an ideal first doll's house. Notice I said first doll's house. These are wooden windows from a Maple Street Melody Jane basement kit, just to prove that you can't rely on wooden windows to tell you the age of a house. This kit is available today. The next clue is to look at the type of wood that was used in the construction of the doll's house. Planks of solid wood indicate that the doll's house is pre-1950s, although I suppose one could make a doll's house today using solid wood. Plywood constructed houses as seen after the Second World War, although due to a shortage of just about everything, we don't start to see modern dolls' houses appearing in great numbers until the early to mid-1950s. Fiberboard had its heyday from the 1960s onwards. Fiberboard houses are often printed on both sides and use wood or plastic supports to hold them together. The most numerous of these are the Scandinavian chalet type houses that were made by Lundby, although I don't have an example of one in my collection, but that's only a matter of time. Medium density fiberboard replaces fiberboard and plywood 1980s onwards. It is then that we see a gradual switch from 18th scale houses for children to 12th scale houses for adult collectors. The top left shows a house dated from the late 1950s to mid-1960s. It smells lovely, and I believe it was a homemade copy of a more expensive store-bought house. If only those walls could talk. On the bottom right, we see the underside of a Triang Doll's House B, with the rough wood jointed together with supports. Incidentally, the workmanship on many of these early Triangs is a little bit on the rough side. My Triang Devonshire cottage even has an original nail stuck through one of the walls. Ouchie! To distinguish plywood from solid wood, view it side on. Plywood is made out of layers of wood glued and pressed together. It has a tendency to splinter, but it is lighter than MDF. The wooden floors look absolutely gorgeous when they are stained or varnished. This is the inside of a delightfully colourful Toyworks Tudor-style doll's house. They are typical of the 1970s and early 1980s. The beautiful colours of fiberboard dolls' houses have an awful tendency to bleach in sunlight, so if you find a bright and jolly one, you are very lucky, and maybe you should buy it. This is a medium density fiberboard doll's house, and is another Doll's House Emporium Classical. Incidentally, when you get a new MDF doll's house kit, I advise you to slap on a coat of white primer before you wallpaper. Otherwise, the preservatives in the MDF react with the wallpaper paste and it looks ghastly. Also, the wallpaper sticks so tightly to the MDF that it could be damaged when you redecorate, as happened to the roof of this house. The exception to the MDF post-1990s rule are the tab and slot houses that are made out of thin plywood. These are made by companies such as Corona Concepts, Greenleaf and Woodcraft Assemblies, among others, and they are so much fun to put together because you can change them to make them exactly how you want them. The next thing to consider is the scale of the doll's house. As many of you may not remember from school, scale is a ratio of how many units of measurement in a doll's house equals how many measurements in real life. Very old houses and homemade houses are often of mixed scales. For example, my Triang Devonshire cottage has internal doors that are in 19th scale, but the rooms are so high that only 12th scale furniture looks right in them. When furnishing a doll's house, if it looks right, it is right, and don't let anyone ever tell you any differently. Believe it or not, doll's house scales go in and out of fashion. Early doll's houses vary so widely and are often of mixed scales. You can also guess the age of a house by the kind of tile, brick, wall and floor papers. The problem is that there are hundreds, maybe thousands of papers on our dolls' houses. As I've said, you could take hundreds of pounds off value of an antique or vintage house by taking off its original papers, and no one likes to lose money that can be spent on, well, more dolls' houses. As you look at other people's houses and learn more about your hobby, you will recognise certain popular papers. These two are typically Triang. This tulip design is typical of Amersham houses, and it comes in at least 4 colour combinations. My best suggestion for getting to know your doll's house papers is to firstly look up reproduction Triang doll's house papers on eBay, and believe me, you will want to buy them. Secondly, do a Google or DuckDuckGo image search for Doll's House papers, vintage Doll's House papers, Triang papers, Hobbies papers, Doll's House Emporium papers, just to familiarise yourself with the most popular designs. Who knows? You might find the very same papers that are in your vintage doll's house. To summarise, although there is no one definite way of knowing if you have a rare vintage or antique house, other than by consulting an expert, the symptoms of an antique doll's house are solid wood construction, metal or wooden windows, mixed or strange scales. It just looks and smells old. Yes, I sniff my doll's houses. Do not smoke around children, pets or dolls' houses. It's bad for their health. Naturally, if you own a doll's house, it's your property, but once you change a doll's house, it is changed forever. If I've not said so before, you are very welcome to the doll's house hobby. We are all here to help and support each other in this wonderful pastime. I would love to see and hear about your doll's houses, and to hear all about all the plans you have for them. So, I hope that this video has given you a few hints about putting an age to your new old doll's house. If you wish to add any comments or corrections, I would love to hear them, so that we can all benefit from sharing what we know. I've just accidentally acquired the most gorgeous 9-room plywood 12th scale doll's house with circuit lighting, and I've got several other projects that I must finish and film, so please like, subscribe, and give me a kick in the comments section if you wish to see more videos. Bright blessings, bye for now, Minty out.